you a psychic, sensitive, or seeker who wants to learn more? Welcome to the Mystic School with SARA WISEMAN, where we dive deep into all things mystic and metaphysical. Here's Sarah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mystic School. I'm so glad to be with you all today. Today we're working on the idea of our new generations, different, learn why younger people think differently and why this matters. So we'll be talking about that today. And I also invite you to call in for free readings Tuesday to 888-298-5569, 888-298-5569. And I'll be happy to talk with you about whatever's going on in your life and whatever you'd like to look into, or anything interesting that's been happening to you on the spiritual or psychic front. I do love to remind people, like, don't wait to call in. This is just a half-hour show, so you want to call in early. Otherwise, we start to run out of time for your questions. So 888-298-5569. I also wanted to mention a couple things. So we have a February event at in Portland at New Renaissance, but that is actually already sold out, which was a big surprise. And so we are now currently signing up for our Seattle event, online event at East West Bookshop, and that is on the website sarawiseman.com, and you can sign up for that. And it's all about finding your soul purpose in the Aquarian age, and sort of how this new age brings some new focus, and where maybe you thought you were going, that's changing actually quite rapidly. And so we're going to do some work on how to find this soul purpose in this more time of change, time of newness, time of evolution. So as we evolve, what we do and how we think and all of our experiences changes, and this is happening rapidly as we move into this age together. Again, it's free readings Tuesday, 888-298-5569. The other thing I wanted to mention to you guys is we have just opened signups for Intuition University Spring 2023, which begins in March, and that's going really quickly too. It's almost like everyone's been waiting for 2023 to jump into things that they've wanted to start for a while. So this is direct training with me, and you learn the core essentials of spiritual intuition. So we take you through 8 weeks of a very intensive training directly in a group with me, so that you can learn how to do these methods and how to do these techniques. It's not hard. It just takes it's just about learning the language. It's just about learning how the universe speaks to us, and how we can learn to interpret that, and how we can learn to sort of get this continual flood of information coming in, so we always understand our next step, or where we're being guided to. I want to talk about new generations, and it's very interesting because as we've gone through, like boomers, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, I don't know what the youngest group is being called yet, but as we go through these different generations, we are starting to see not only differences in culture or differences in historical events, we're starting to see not only differences in technology, but we're starting to see differences in awareness. So that maybe for people, older boomers might have received their spirituality as something that happened in possibly a church, like you would go to a church and you would talk to God, or you would go to a church and you would pray to God, or you would go to a church and you would have a spiritual experience. And that was sort of like almost as if you had to go into this place that was either very quiet, you were by yourself, it was just you and God, or it was you were going in community, and the community was creating this, sometimes we talk about it, the collective hum. And so a lot of that, those generations, that was their experience of spirituality. Now I have lots and lots of clients who come to me, and one of the questions I often ask is, what was your religious or spiritual experience as a child? And sometimes people just say, I was devoutly, my family was devoutly this religion or devoutly that religion, and they say, and it made no sense to me, and I just rejected it right away. And I find this pretty interesting because for me, my early religious background, which was more Protestant and then Catholic, I just deeply fell into the reverence, and I loved it. I loved all of it. I mean, like I was deeply into it from a very young age. And, my parents weren't into it at all. Like they weren't churchgoers. And so this difference of either really finding a place of solace or a place that you understood from the religion that you were exposed to at that time, or being exposed to a religious organization or culture and just completely rejecting it. And those seem to be sort of the two paths that I noticed from people who were more like in boomer age. And so this is interesting because our association of spirituality came from religion. And nowadays, more and more I hear people say, I'm spiritual, not religious. This seems to be the phrase that people, Gen X and older, might use. I'm spiritual, not religious. So what does that mean? I'm spiritual. And then they might say something like, love is the ultimate answer, or everything is connected, or God is everywhere. These might be common ways of thinking about this idea of being spiritual but not religious. So we've really stepped away. A lot of people have stepped away from the hierarchy of the organized religion, which is like the humble worshiper is at the bottom, and then there's the priest or the pastor, and then there's whoever is higher than them in the organization, and then whoever's higher, and then God's at the very top. So really you're quite separate from God. You've got to go through all these layers. Like you'd have to get promoted a lot to be able to speak to God directly. And so all of that organizational system, this idea that we're at the bottom, God's at the very top, and there's a lot of middlemen in between, that seems to have become something that's not really, people aren't really subscribing to that plan anymore. What most people are experiencing now in this evolution of our spiritual understanding is this idea that it's an equal playing field. All souls are equal. There's no hierarchy in souls. God is within us and without us. And as I look at it, as God is collective soul, we are pieces of soul. God is all of our pieces of soul together. That's what the universe is. That's what consciousness is. That's what love is. It's all of us as one. And so this is a big change. This is a big change in our view. It takes us from this idea that we're very separate, we're at the bottom rung, to this idea of we're one with. And this also takes us away from all of the ways when we were in organized religion There was a lot of morality, there were a lot of laws, there was a lot of cultural belief system that sort of came into play there that we needed to subscribe to in order to be accepted by the structure. You need to, not eat meat on a certain day, or wear a certain type of outfit, or do this level of ritual. So there's a lot of value in many of those practices, but the bigger thing was, if you don't behave in a way that the group wants you to behave in, or that the religion or the organized systems says that you should be, then you're not accepted. And this is the place where a lot of people had falling outs with organized religion. Why can't I just be myself, a general good person, whatever that means to you, and yet I'm still being rejected by this thing that says they're in charge of God? So nowadays we have this different idea where different people have different beliefs in morality, different beliefs of how they should live, but this bigger idea seems to be that consciousness doesn't really relate to what color you're wearing, or what you're eating on a Friday, or whatever day it is, or what rituals you're doing. That consciousness is something much bigger, almost like it's a different question, or it's asking the wrong question because the answer is so much bigger than it used to be. So all of this helps us change. All this helps us change. Now, the new generations are different because as we were raised with very strict people who were in this hierarchy, they were at the bottom, God was at the top, a bunch of middle men in between. The fire and brimstone, afraid to do things wrong, needing to fit in. And then along comes the different generations. They come along, they start opening up, they start rejecting that view that there's a hierarchy. Instead, suddenly we're all equal. And then now these newer generations come in that are our children, or maybe even grandchildren, or our young adults. And they sort of look at, like, why did you even have that hierarchy to begin with? What were you thinking? Like, why did you have those rules? It doesn't make sense. And they come in with a very different mindset. They're just like, why did you do that? How could you have fallen for this idea of the hierarchy or the separation? And the other thing that's different about the new generations is not only did they come in without the same level of religious adherence. Now, I'm very well aware that many people do still belong to formalized religions, and they do that. So we're talking about those that have broken away from this. And according to some of the Pew reports, I think it was 70% of people no longer identify with the religion they were raised with as children. So this is a large group of people that are like, oh, my family used to be this, but I don't do that anymore. And I just sort of have this more general, I'm spiritual but not religious. And then my kids have, this is the new generation. So they are coming at it from a different cultural and a different spiritual perspective. They're not coming at it from this hierarchy place. And so the other reason they're different, so they're different because they're not raised within the religious system, and they don't relate to what the religious system was even about because they don't have a frame of reference for it. And then they also have this nifty thing called, the internet, their phones. And so they are some of the first generations, these younger Gen Z and below, where, they're pretty much born with a phone in their hand at some level, or they get a phone really early. And suddenly, instead of having the strict rules of a particular religious system or particular cultural system, they can travel the world. They can travel the world instantly and all day long, and they are rubbing shoulders with people who may be similar to them, but also may be very, very different and who have very different ideas. And so this whole idea of getting a very broad exposure to many different kinds of ideas that no longer are dependent on the family system to provide, no longer dependent on the church system to provide. So they're open in a different way. And the freedom that comes with this level of interaction. Now, you could argue, okay, but all they're doing is going on TikTok. How valid is that? That's not really elevating them. And I agree, it's not. It's nice to watch puppy videos, but it's also not, it's probably not, or it's nice to watch food videos, but it's probably not shifting the awareness that much. It's not. And yet, just this simple idea that instead of going through the multi-layers and praying to God and you hope God will get your message, to the idea that we're all equal, God is within us and without us, we're all part of collective soul, to this younger group that might not even speak in those terms, soul, I don't know, I'm not sure that that's a term they're going to be using necessarily, but this idea of everyone, or we're in it, or we support each other. And so it's almost like collective soul really pops into the human experience of the younger person. There's a sense of us, there's a sense of we. It's not this individualized me and my. There's a sense of cooperative awareness, where there's this awareness that we have to do this together because otherwise things won't work. And interestingly, a lot of the younger folks, younger kids, are super, super involved with the ecology and nature. They haven't had as much exposure to nature, most likely, because, back generations ago, we lived a lot closer to nature. Even if we lived in a city, it was less dense. There were less cars. We might, not everybody might have a car. We just lived a simpler way. Like you might not have had, some of our grandparents didn't have bathrooms. They had an outhouse that they went to, or this type of, they did farming, they did gardening. And so we were pretty close to nature a lot. And now that the new generations come, this idea of a return to nature, and this fascination with things like having your own chickens in your yard, or going to look at the trees, or having plants, or going outside, or going hiking. And these are all things that they didn't have growing up, and now they want to return to this sense. And so again, nature is where a lot of people have their biggest spiritual breakthroughs. They have this connection with this bigger consciousness that's found from the natural world. And so they're going and having those experiences. And again, part of it is like there was this kind of lockdown from about Gen Z, or maybe even a little bit older than that. But there was this kind of lockdown where suddenly kids were no longer free-range kids, where they could wander home from school by themselves and look at the flowers on their way, or look at the trees, or look at the bugs on the sidewalk. That was all taken away. They were popped into a car and never allowed outside hardly at all. So this sense of being free in a space, or being by yourself in the environment, or understanding how to do things like find your way home without your phone, for example. Like, how do you do that? How do you navigate a terrain? There was so much overlayer of protection that a lot of this was missed. And so now there's this return, and there's this fascination. Like, I want to go into nature. I want to be around animals. I want to have plants. I want to adventure. And again, all of this is creating this deeper sense of connection. So what we're seeing again in the new generations, some of the reasons they're different are they don't ascribe to the hierarchy of organized religion anymore. That's something they're not that interested in. They have immediate connection because of their devices. So they're exposed to a lot more people from all over the world. And then because the generations before them were so protected, these new ones are like wanting to go out and experience nature as one of the things that they find really enlivening, this ecological consciousness. And then finally, there's this idea of the equality as coming out as non-racist, non-genderist, non-sexist, non-ableist. This idea of the us as this sort of new evolution of consciousness where anything that's separate is understood to be incorrect. They are us versus me versus you, or us versus them. They are us, and they're having this understanding and proclaiming loudly, like some of these old rules or old biases are just really not acceptable. So as you work to, if you're a person that's working with the new generations, or if you're just interested in them, it's pretty fascinating. There hasn't been a group with these particular characteristics. I don't know, but it feels like, especially the technology piece, we haven't had it before. So this is kind of a new marker arriving right in time, right in the start of the Aquarian age, to sort of take us to the new level. And when you understand that these generations, Gen Z and below, Gen Z and younger, are the ones, right, in 20 years, maybe even in 10 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, this group comes into power with all of these ideas. And the old school, which is rapidly leaving now, also begins to take on newer and newer approaches. Already we're seeing the effect of millennials in leadership positions, and then we're going to have Gen Z come in, and then the next, and it's like things are going to be changing incredibly rapidly. It's like this idea of we are who we've been waiting for, but it's not necessarily we, the boomers or older. We're not waiting for us anymore. We're waiting for these next groups to come in and bring their new ideas and their new awarenesses and consciousness into the world. And this is what's happening. And I'm, for one, feeling incredibly hopeful about the whole situation. I have the great pleasure of knowing quite a few younger people, and I'm just astonished by their awareness and what they're thinking about, and kind of how they're approaching their place in this part of history and this part of our human evolution. Alrighty, everybody. You have been listening to Sarah Wiseman at SARAWISEMAN.com. A couple things. We've got our free mini course on the website, SARAWISEMAN.com. You can go get there and get that. We've got signups for our March online event at Seattle's East West Bookshop. And you can sign up for there at the website also, SARAWISEMAN.com. And remember also, we are having active signups for Intuition University Spring 2023. We always sell out. This is the, I think it's either the 11th or 12th year, but it's sold out since it started. It always sells out. I try and keep the groups pretty manageable. And this is direct training with me, the core essentials of spiritual intuition. And if you like that 8-week session, you can go on and take the full year training, and then you can take the reader training and become one of the visionary psychics that I feature on the website. They're just marvelously gifted readers, and I've all trained with them directly. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and I will look forward to being with you next time. Thanks for listening.
All right.